Okay, well, thanks very much to Ben and Rosie for inviting me along today. I really, really appreciate that. And thanks everyone for turning up on what is in Penzance a very sunny day. I hope it is with you as well. Um, okay, so just before I start, actually, I got a feeling for where people were in terms of their green journeys, as it were. But I'm going to do a little straw poll, if that's okay. I've got you up in gallery mode, so I can see when you raise your hand. Um, it's just to gauge about sort of awareness and also what your experiences have been so far, where you have had experiences of EcoChurch. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand when you recognize yourself or your church as fitting into one of these categories. Okay, here we go. I don't know much about EcoChurch yet. Anyone in that situation? Right. Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Second one is, I know a little about it, but we haven't yet registered as a church on the EcoChurch website. Anyone? Yep, okay. Right.
I've registered.
Okay, thank you. Oh, you have, right. Okay, the third one is, you have registered on the website, but not yet done the survey.
That's me.
Thank you, Helen and Wendy and Sheila and Julia. Okay, thank you very much. This is fun, isn't it? It gets better. You're already registered on the website and you're working towards bronze.
Well, yes, I suppose so. Yes.
That's fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah. You've already achieved bronze and you're working towards silver. Ooh, right. Okay, thank you very much. 2, that's great. Thank you. And you've already achieved silver and you're working towards gold. Anyone so far? Okay. You will be soon, sometime soon. Thanks very much. It just gives me an idea of how to actually how to sort of frame this really. So I'm going to share screens from now on. Otherwise, it's going to be looking at me, which is not great. So let me just see if I can do this. Right. Okay. Let's make it big. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm now going to have that as my screen. Right. Very good. Okay. So what we're going to cover today is what is EcoChurch, but since there's, I think, perhaps only one person who isn't entirely sure about it, and then how does it work? Those sections are going to be very short because I think most of you have got a feeling for it anyway. What I've been asked by Ben to do is to concentrate on our journey as a church. So that's St Mary's Penzance journey as a church. And I do realise that this isn't the template of what every church does by any means. So this is our kind of, if you like, our personal journey as a church. So maybe it's helpful. Maybe there's some generic stuff in there for you. I'm then going to come on to any potential barriers which have cropped up. Not necessarily for us, but maybe some barriers for you, and certainly have cropped up in other churches that I've heard of. And then I'll end, hopefully, in a positive note. I'll try to address those potential barriers, by the way, and then I'll go on to the resources that are available, which are many. Then, if we've got time at the end of that, I'm sure we will, to split into some breakout groups, maybe of 3 or 4 people, because I really do believe that this kind of session is really helpful for someone to come along and talk. Some of the kind of horizontal learning goes on by people who are just sharing their examples in small groups, and I think that's, and I've got an idea, I've got a wondering about that with a possible suggestion, but wait for that later. So there we are. That's how the thing's going to be. It's probably going to take about 20 minutes or so. So right, the second slide. I'm just going to sorry, put this down. Right. The second slide is what is EcoChurch? Now, EcoChurch is a set of resources which help churches become greener. That's a very simple statement there. It was set up by a Christian conservation charity called Arosha UK and launched in January 2016. I remember that well because I went along to that launch. It was in the downstairs in St Paul's Cathedral. I used to live in London at that time, and it was Rowan Williams, who I think is great actually, and he was addressing him. And since he's left, since he's no longer Archbishop of Canterbury, he's really been released to talk about all sorts of things. And one of his great passions is greening the planet, really. EcoChurch is now the standard scheme, which is used by churches in England and Wales and now Cornwall as well, which I'm delighted about. Okay. Right, there's 5 categories, and that they're there: worship and teaching, management of church buildings, management of church land, community and global engagement and lifestyle. Now, there's a set of questions in each of these categories. I've sort of numbered the questions there to enable churches to conduct an audit survey for their church to see how they're doing. The questions, I'll emphasize, are simple and clear, and there's no right or wrong answers as such. Your answers will tell you how far you've traveled as a church and give you suggestions and resources to help you along the way. It's now, again, emphasis coming up. It's never too early to complete the survey, even if your answers are no to most questions. You can then use the survey questions as a planning tool, and your entries are saved when you log out, so nothing is lost when you log back in again. So you can use that as an incremental steps in your journey. So it's there online. There may seem a lot of questions in some of the categories. For example, management of church buildings and community and global engagement. But some questions may not be appropriate for your church. For example, if you've got a listed building in which you can't make certain changes, or if you have no church land, perhaps you might even meet in a hall for your church. If that's the case, then you simply answer these questions as not applicable. And that's not considered as negative. It's something which is simply not possible. Therefore, you can't be expected to meet those particular questions. It's not going to hinder you in any way. Okay. 3 award levels. One is bronze, silver, and gold. To achieve bronze, you have to achieve at least bronze in all of the 5 categories that we've talked about. To achieve silver, you have to achieve at least silver in all of the 5 categories. And for gold, you have to achieve gold in all 5 categories. Okay. Now, one of the things that Ben has shared with me beforehand is, and I probably mentioned the word joy at some point in the past, that this can be a joyful and certainly not a stressful project. There can be a lot of good things coming out of this, and no one is. It's not a race. You have to start where you are, and in a sense, keep that goal and eventual goal in hand, but really go in simple steps. And then as you do the particular things suggested in the survey, then go back into the website and tick them off if you like. And what you'll find, and I love this, what you'll find at the top of the screen is that you'll see the church changing from kind of 0 to bronze. It turns bronze in color, and then into silver and so on. So you can actually see, if you like, visual. Well, you see visually, of course, that's what you do, don't you? But you can actually see the colors change. So it's not just about lots of words and numbers and stuff like that. So I find that quite helpful. So this is our journey as into Eco Church. St Mary's Penzance, that's what it looks like in a very, very sunny day. And of course, it's like this every single day in Penzance. Of course it is. I think Photoshop might have something to do with this. And I have to say, I don't really like the look of our churchyard there. It's much, much wilder now. And we've planted quite a few things, and we've let things go as well. So that's rather good. It's a Grade 2 listed parish church in the centre of Penzance. And that's been a place of worship really since the 14th century, with that present building erected in the mid-1800s. So what did I do first? After registering on the Eco Church website, so that's just Googling Eco Church, going in and logging, you just set up a password and go in and start filling out the form, basically. You don't have to do anything with it at that stage, but it just gives you an idea and gives you a feel for what they're looking at. So I completed the initial survey in October 2019 to see how I thought we might score in each of the categories. At that time, I personally was very new to Penzance. I had just moved a couple of years before and new to the church. So I was kind of discerning how I might contribute to worshipping in this place. I'd shared with the congregation my work in Green Christian and the importance of the church in playing its part in creation care. But there wasn't a formal team of people dealing with green matters. There still isn't. Now, I'll come on to that later. There wasn't a formal team. And I guess that might be a similar situation for most of us here. You might be the only one and also be feeling a little disheartened at not being able to garner more support. We'll try to tackle that a wee bit later. During the next 2 years, till November 2021, I'd been leading on Green Church Kerno, leading the church, and the church had achieved Silver Award status, which I'm sure some of you did at that time. Now, when I arrived in Cornwall, I was surprised that the diocese hadn't adopted Eco Church and was instead using Green Church Kerno, which is a fine way of doing things. But it was very much a paper-based system. So when the decision was made by the diocese to go for Eco Church, I was delighted, and it's so much easier to use with lots of up-to-date resources available online. In November last year, I carried out another Eco Church survey and shared our results with our vicar, Sean, who knew much more about the church than me and was able to fill in where I couldn't answer. And later I did another one with Keno. Keno is our sort of administrator, if you like, and he deals with lots of the building stuff, as does the church warden. So so that's what I did at that stage. That was November 2021. And I'll just quickly run through our journey for each of the 5 categories. Now, again, I need to emphasize that this is our specific journey and obviously not a template for every church. Your journeys will depend on, obviously, your own context and also your starting point. So again, I'm going to be mentioning some stuff which you're going to be shaking your head and saying, well, we can't do that. That's not the way we're set up. As indeed, some of the stuff you've been mentioning earlier on in the meeting, I thought, well, that's really good, but I wonder whether it would really work in our church. So there's all sorts of, there isn't a strict template, if you like. Okay, so next slide coming up. Right, so I'm now going into the categories, the 5 categories, and the sorts of things that we did and what we are considering doing. Now, while I was working through the survey with Sean, we both felt that there's still a long way to go on this journey, and that we had scored quite well on each of the categories, particularly on worship and teaching. So some of the things that we did I've shown here, and some of those things you may be doing to an extent in your church. Regular is regular, right? At least 3 times a year, I would say, probably. We do sermons, talks at the front, which really have a lot of creation care in them. And certainly I've been allowed to, go up and in place of the sermon, if you like, talk about this as well. We also, most occasions, as part of our intercessions in the church, we talk about creation care as well, and some of those might be very topical, like for instance last November around that time, with COP26 and so on and so forth, and so there's always that kind of mention of that there. We hold services, particularly during creation tide, and also courses. One of the people earlier, one of you talked about LOAF, local, organic, animal friendly, and fair trade. That kind of food, the food. We're very lucky in Penzance. We've got lots of independent shops and local producers. So I ran a course, a Lent course, about 3 years ago, over 6 weeks, on LOAF and how we might use that in our church and in our wider community, and also the theological basis of it as well. And one of the big things that particularly Shan and her team are involved in is work in local schools. That's not simply assemblies, although those are great. She does lots of things with the local church schools, both in Madryn and in Penzance. Okay, I should say that in this category we achieve gold level. Okay, but not in every category by any means. And the fact that Shan is a third order Franciscan has been so important in getting behind lots of these initiatives. That, of course, is not the case in every church, as we well know. So, so we achieved gold in that category. And all the other categories, which I'll come on to, we achieved silver. So let's go on to the next one. I think when we talk about eco-church, the tendency naturally is to talk about buildings, and that's fine. And I have to say, I'm not very technical, so it's not that I completely avoid it by any means, but I find quite a lot of this sort of quite difficult. So we have other people in the church that find these things a little bit easier. But and it's also, as I mentioned, a listed building, so there's lots of things. Well, it's quite limited what we can do, given the age and structure and the status, if you like, of the building. And that meant that we could correctly and authentically say that some questions that are mentioned at eco-church were not applicable to us. So I simply put that down as not applicable. But on the positive side, some of the things are listed here. A couple of years ago, we switched fuel supplier to Good Energy, 100% renewable energy supplier. I've personally been using that in the houses that I've lived in, well, the last 2 houses I've lived in over the last 10 years, domestically, if you like. And I found them very, very good. I've also heard a talk, actually, by the then CEO, Julia Davenport, I think it was. And she has such a passion. And of course, there are other ones as well, like Ecotricity. Someone's mentioned others as well. But that's what we're doing. We're doing that for both electricity and gas. And this is a difficult time for fuel supply, of course. So I don't actually deal with the bills for that, looking at the bills for that, thankfully. But I would recommend, certainly, if it's possible, to switch to 100% energy, because it's actually very difficult. I remember going through a process in my last church of presenting to the PCC, what the various tariffs were, and lots of energy suppliers now have got lots of green tariffs, but they're presented in different forms. So it was very, very difficult for me anyway to present that. Good Energy was much simpler. We're a registered fair trade church. We don't use paper cups or plates. We use recycled loaf paper, and we're currently considering installing yet more LED lighting and also cycle racks. And I mentioned earlier the possibility of installing solar panels. You know, I'm not sure about that. I love the idea. Again, our last church had solar panels, but it's a lot of money. It's a big capital investment, and obviously we need to get some sort of funding for it. And I know the state of finances in Truro, so I'm not sure whether that's a goer, but it's something we're considering. And also setting targets to reduce our carbon footprint using the energy footprint tool. What I think that's a great thing to do, because rather than any sort of tick box exercises, is to make this eco church a real incremental growing thing. So I said earlier we're on a journey, but it shouldn't be difficult to set a target. So for instance, we could set a target, let's say a 5% reduction per year on our carbon emissions. That's a target using the energy footprint tool. I mean, achieving it's going to be more challenging, but that's just something that I think is a good idea to do. The next slide is on land. Our church grounds are maintained by Cormac and as a subcontractor of Cornwall Council. But the grounds are still part of the church, and the land is managed well with, for example, bird boxes and sensitive, I've called it sensitive grass cutting with wildlife in mind. And we engage schools and local residents in sowing and planting native flowers and sowing seeds every year. And we're also now thinking about having more church services outside. I know that the diocese are thinking, we've got something in mind, the church's environment group. We've already held a forest church in, where was it again? Yeah, wherever it was.
It was in the woods in Falmouth, wasn't it? Just trying to think of that.
Yeah, I got it. In the
Tregeniggy Woods.
That was it, yes. What I'm finding since moving to Cornwall, that most things start with Tre, and I'm just so lost in naming things. But that's where it was, and that was led by Ewan, I remember. And now we're thinking about doing a beach service as well, sometime possibly in September. So, but in Penzance, in our church, having more church services outside is great. It's a beautiful, beautiful setting. So I think that's something we could certainly do. Community and global engagement. Okay, that's pretty wide-ranging. Okay, so what we do is that we hope, and that this is something that you might think is a good idea, or perhaps not, but we do. We host XR and other public meetings. We had an amazing exhibition of XR banners maybe about 4 months ago, around about the time of G7 and COP26. And right round our sort of balcony, we had XR banners. We have a regular dialogue with local councillors and our local MP, Derek Thomas, on green issues. It's an interesting one. I actually had Derek here in my home about 2 months ago, and I thought we were just going to have a little chat about this, and he stayed for 2 hours. But that was good, and I was able to share with him some of the things that we're doing as a church, and also in Green Christian. And I know I believe that his heart is in green issues, although his voting record is debatable. But anyway, so we have this ongoing correspondence, which is interesting. We, as a church, we always provide vegetarian and vegan options in any meals that we provide, and we're currently considering engaging with a specific overseas environmental project. Okay. So I'm going on to the next one. I'm kind of going through these quite quickly, and I'm not covering every question, obviously not. That's a long session, probably a weekend session actually. So let's move on to the final one, which is lifestyle. We hold events such as clothes swaps, certainly annually, to reduce the amount of consumer purchases and to promote sharing. And we provide also helpful green tips on the website and newsletter to our members. And now this next thing that I've mentioned here, and I've mentioned before, and I can't emphasize enough really, that we've found, is that I think it's absolutely critical to the eco-church journey. We found that every PCC meeting has an agenda item. 6 months ago, we called it Creation Care, but now that we're really serious about eco-church, we're calling it eco-church. Everyone knows that name, eco-church, where we look each time at around 3 green initiatives, which we consider are practical for us as a church to consider, and also review some of the things that we had talked about in previous months. So that means that the whole thing, this whole project, is continually reviewed and moving rather than being a kind of tick box, kind of static, if you like. So we did all this stuff, and we're doing all this stuff, and then in February we were delighted to have a visit from Bishop Hugh, and to celebrate us getting a silver award. And there it is, the plaque. Okay, I love this plaque. It's the plaque is made from recycled wood by the Grassmarket Project in Edinburgh, another place I used to live in. Not the Grassmarket, but in Edinburgh. So I know this place, and it's the wood is kind of reconstituted, if you like, made like this amongst people who are really, really challenged in many, many ways, both socially and mentally. And I notice it doesn't say now, but what it used to say in 2016, and perhaps still is the case, is that the recycled wood was from the pews of churches. I love that thought. Perhaps they've run out of pews of churches. I don't really know, but that's what the plaque actually looks like. Okay.
George, you can churches can still donate pews to that project,
right?
But it's the transport issues. But that's right. Yes, it's a fantastic thing. They were all made from pews, but that's still an option. Okay. So there we go.
Thanks very much, Ben. Thank you. Okay, so that's our kind of journey, if you like. By no means unique, but may not be yours. And here are some potential barriers. I didn't come up with these, I have to say. I looked at one of the Church of England's eco-church webinars, and they did a sort of straw poll at the beginning. And these are the potential barriers that came up, but I think they're quite generic. So what I've decided to do is to list them here. I'll keep this up on the screen, and I'll give you my own thoughts, really. These aren't from the Church of England or whatever, on how to address some of this stuff. So some people in that particular webinar, and there was probably about 60 people there, I don't know, said, we don't know enough about, eco-church yet. Okay, I've covered some of this, but speak to your vicar and get agreement to, that's, yeah. I think I missed this. Hold on, just a sec. I may have missed the page. Here we are. Right. Okay. So as I've said, go to the eco-church website. Have a look at the Church of England webinars. I'm going to come on to this towards the end of this session. There are lots of them, and I know Ben is going to be talking about this towards the end of the session. Mm-hmm. And also events like today, hosted by Ben and Rosie, getting to know each other and sharing your eco-church journeys as Creation Care Champion meetings. Thanks so much to Ben for introducing these. I remember I used to go to some of them with Lucy as well, and they were terrific. But I love the regularity of these. And I've got it. This is my suggestion that I came up with earlier. I wonder also, and this is just a wondering, and I don't want to place any more work on Rosie or Ben, or I honestly don't. If it might, in fact, this might be less. If it might be a good idea to set up a champions support email group where we can put our questions and suggestions to a central point, and that central point simply puts them out to everyone in the group, blind copy. So and blind copy each question and suggestion to all of us so that we can all kind of grow together. Maybe this is something that Ben has thought of in the past. I'm not entirely sure. Because in that way, we can have horizontal learning, if you like, on the ground learning amongst champions, rather than relying totally. I know we don't rely totally, but relying too much on stuff coming from the centre, if I can put it that way. I think what comes from the centre is fantastic. Ben, what would you like? You want to say something?
Just completely with you all the way on that, George. I will say that we have attempted to create a Google group for our Creation Care champions. And the limiting factor is my knowledge and Rosie's knowledge. And we are not technical enough. So we have sought support, but it is coming. So the goal would be indeed to have a Google group where you can subscribe to, because that deals with the GDPR issues, and then you can choose to receive or not. But that would be a forum in which we can share and communicate and actually learn from each other. So thank you for bringing that up afresh.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you. Right, so coming on to the next one, some of the people said they don't know what to do first. Okay, right. Here's some suggestions. Speak to your vicar if you have a vicar, and also get agreement from the PCC. But even if you don't have, maybe your PCC is 2 months away, I don't know. Do what I did, which was I had an agreement from anyone, to be honest. And I just went onto the EcoChurch website and I just started filling the thing in. And then afterwards, I then went to, I waited for when it was appropriate and spoke to Shan and also the PCC. So, and just go onto the website, create an account, dead easy, just, password, then complete the survey to the best of your knowledge, then share your findings with Vicar and PCC. I think that's the first things to do. I need a group to work with. I can't do it alone. Yeah, it's best to work in a team, obviously, but that may not be possible in terms of a formal Creation Care team. In St Mary's, I found that working with the church warden, the cluster business manager, and the PCC, and at different times, not all together, there is, de facto in place a virtual team. In my previous church in South London, this is, there may be a bit of joy coming in here, Ben. I know you've been waiting for the joy bit. In my previous church in South London, I arranged for one of our regular Wednesday Bible study meetings to have, instead of that, have a fun game, an EcoChurch game instead. There were about 15 of us, and we split into 3 teams around 3 tables, just like the University Challenge, you can imagine. It wasn't really, but never mind. And each team took, one of them took worship and teaching and lifestyle. So that's 25 questions altogether. The next one took management of church buildings and management of church land. That's a whopping great 48 questions for them. And the third one was community and global engagement, which was 27 questions. We worked through, I was going to say silently, it was really noisy. We worked through each question to the best of their ability. There was great discussion going on. It was a bit of a game. And each team totaled their own points. And then they discussed it. And that's not perhaps an expected way to introduce EcoChurch awareness into your church, but it was great fun and meant that lots of people bought into the process who would not normally be involved in the green stuff. So maybe something for you to consider. Lack of agreement from PCC, clergy, others in the church. Okay. It's so important, as I said, to have this in the PCC agenda, so it's owned by sort of the whole church. although you will almost invariably be considered as leading on it. But, you know, that's maybe okay. It's not seen as part of our Christian mission. Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 17. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, and so on and so forth. It's in there. Okay. The Anglican Communion. And I think, is it the case that everyone here, Ben, is this ecumenical, this meeting? Or is it?
It is largely, it is open as an ecumenical group, but we find the majority of folk who are joining us presently, I think probably because of the Kernow Green Church Award access route, are largely coming from our Truro diocese.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, the Anglican Communion's fifth mark of mission, which many of you will be aware of, is to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth. And I would argue that at least two of the other four marks of mission are directly impacted by that fifth one and will increasingly become dependent on creation care. And that is to respond to human need by loving service as more refugees leave areas of the world. And also to transform unjust structures of society. So I would say those are climate change, climate crisis issues, which are going to become increasingly so. And as we know, both the Church of England and Truro Diocese plan to reach zero carbon emissions by 2030. And here's another thing from involving young people from Tear Fund, the Tear Fund charity website. This is from February 2021. Young people call on the church to tackle the climate crisis. New research that was then has found that 9 out of 10 Christian teenagers surveyed are concerned about climate change, but just 1 in 10 believe their church is doing enough to respond to the climate crisis. So, you know, that's what the next generation are saying. So they should be heard, no matter what the demographic of the church is. I feel daunted by the scale of the challenge. Okay, I'll repeat, one step at a time. It's not a race. Incremental changes. Lack of time and other priorities. We don't have much time left. There must be a priority. This must be a priority for every church as it goes to the very heart of the Christian message. Now, I definitely get that some people don't have time. I really do get that. And that's not to say that they're not doing other wonderful stuff, because they almost invariably are. They may be working in food banks. They may be working with disadvantaged communities. They may be involved in pastoral and a whole host of other things. And I definitely get that. I'm only saying that this is a planet issue. This is a creation care issue which has to be prioritized in some way. And the final one was worried what it might cost. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. Everything is free. The EcoChurch program is free. All the support materials are free. These webinars are free. Everything is free. It doesn't cost anything. The only thing, if you decide to have a wooden plaque rather than a certificate, there is a cost for that, which is about £90 or something. And there is the ability to make a further donation to help EcoChurch in future. Resources. Now, I've mentioned some of this already. I'm coming to the end of this. I hope I haven't overrun by too much. The EcoChurch website is there. Green Christian, which was mentioned earlier, just a whole host of resources, both worship resources, theological resources, campaign resources, leaflets, a whole discussion groups, the whole thing is there. And also this network, this Creation Care Champions network. And there's a whole host of other ones as well. Now, There are 3 1-hour videos, Church of England Eco Church webinars, which are freely available on the Church of England website, from Helen Stevens, the Church Relations Manager at Arosha, who run the Eco Church programme. Now, the 3 that are on the website, I think, are the ones that she ran a year ago. But nothing has changed in terms of the content, if you like. She ran another set last month, but they've been sent out, and recordings were made available to those people who attended. But I don't think they're quite on the website yet. But I'm going to just put the links to. Those are the links. That was the first one, and that was called Getting Started with Eco Church, and it covered all of those things. I'm not going to go through them now. The next one was Working Towards an Award and Maintaining Momentum, which is I've been trying to emphasise. That's at that link there. The importance of setting a vision is there. And the final one is not specifically Eco Church, but that's about working towards net zero and how Eco Church framework and net zero can fit together. Those are at least some of the resources. Thanks for watching and listening.
Are there any reflections from the groups that have managed to gather? Any kind of a key point you'd like to bring back to share with the rest of us? Wendy.
We would.
Sorry, I'll go with hands if that's okay. It just helps me see.
Well, I think one of the things that stood out for me is how important it is to engage with other people in the community already doing stuff and be part of that. So not just, obviously, yes, encourage it in our own church, but also to, work with schools, councils,
Absolutely.
wildlife trusts,
Yeah.
because we're all in it together, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. One of my all those years ago when I was at theological college, one of my favourite books I read was called Joining In with the Spirit. And I love that sense of seeking out where the Spirit is already working and joining in with that. So my heart kind of responds like when George was saying, opening up the church for XR, giving them a place to meet. In my view, that's joining in with the Spirit. So thanks for that, Wendy. Any other things that you'd love to share back into the room? Claire, you were going to share something, I think.
Well, yes, just at the end when we were running out of time. When we get this group, this Google group going, sort of central ideas for grants and how you go about it and who and where and what, really.
Yeah.
That was me.
Okay. One of the key things to say is, especially in relation to net zero, is that the Church of England have recently committed £190 million of funding over the next 3 trienniums, so that's the next 9 years, to support net zero work. Now, this goes to General Synod this weekend. And I think probably the proposal will receive generally good support. The finances will come under scrutiny because it's a lot of money. But there will be funding, but we don't expect to see the avenues of how to approach that funding probably until early next year. So there's a bit of a time lag. And one of the things we are discussing as the Diocese of Truro is kind of how to potentially fund in that time gap, because we have such a short run period here to 2030 that we actually need to get working. So we're trying to understand if there's a way that we can offset some of that funding initially. We don't yet know what it will cover, but we are hopeful that it will have a generous breadth to it. So there'll be more on that. And yes, absolutely, that will be in the Google groups. Bridget, did I see a hand going up there?
No, sorry. No.
Okay. Anybody else want to bring anything back into the room from what George has said or from those discussion groups? Is that you,
Well,
Jan? Jan or Ian? Who wants to go?
Ian.
Ian.
I was discussing with a friend from Stratton how we incorporate education generally into our worship at the cathedral. We are lucky to have Canon Ellie, but certain times of the year, Regation, Harvest, Climate Sunday, Creation Tide, she takes those opportunities of preaching strictly on creation matters. And we are also, as a creation group, trying to prepare a creation prayer diary. And in that diary also include practical information with regard to how we as a nation reduce our carbon footprint. So it's a sort of educational project to the wider community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Jan, come on in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we were talking, and it was interesting because we are polar opposites in that we are an incredibly rural community at Launcestalls, just a mile and a half outside Stratton.
Yeah.
And to be talking to someone from the cathedral, it was very interesting at the different things that we have, the challenges we have, and those that are also similar,
Yes.
and that we can use. Yeah.
Right. Well, there is the beauty of this group.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I will say, in terms of decarbonising, and I think we put this in last month's newsletter, I really do encourage you to look at the Centre for Alternative Technology in Machynlleth in Wales, and they did a report called Zero Carbon Britain, and it has some fantastic and hugely exciting insights into how Britain could decarbonise. So that is I think it's a great resource. I spent 2 days with them on a conference, and it was incredibly encouraging how readily we could do this, but it requires policy and investment, and there are things that we can always be praying for. Well, let's just say, George, thank you. Thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for sharing with us with great honesty your journey, and just at a hugely accessible level, and kind of inspiring us to push on with this. Rosie and I will commit to ensuring that somehow before the summer we have a Google group in place so that can start running. Google Groups is the preferred option largely because you subscribe to it, and therefore it covers all of the GDPR issues, and it also means it's yours to choose how you use rather than us trying to centrally control something, which is not what I want to do in any way. So we hope to update that rapidly over the next few weeks. Before we kind of come into land in these last few minutes, I kind of had 3 things I wanted to share with you. The first one is in regard to the energy footprint tool. If as yet you have not completed that, or your warden hasn't, or however it works in your church, could you encourage those who do, or speak to your vicar and ask for that to happen? Because last year we were second highest in the country with a 58.9% return rate, and presently we're at about 22%, and it closes at the end of this month. Now, part of the challenge is that they've drawn the date forward to the end of July so that next year we can open at the same time as all parish returns open in January, which then ties up with things like charities returns, commissioned returns, all sorts of stuff. So, but if you haven't yet had an opportunity to look at that, please do. It's not particularly about a competition between the dioceses, but unless we are hitting 75+% in the future, the data is hard to use as a solid source of data because there's not quite enough of it. So please, where you can encourage, do encourage that. I saw, Helen, was it your finger up in there? It was.
Yeah, so with that thing, I'm going to send it, I've done it, so I'm going to send it to you. But this pre-population of the building size, so I don't need to worry about that, do I?
It should be pre-populated, that.
Yeah.
But if it isn't,
I don't know how to pre-populate it.
Okay, well, we'll pick this one up afterwards with you if that's all right.
I'll phone you up.
Okay.
And we'll sort that one out. That'd be lovely.
Or maybe I've entered it in a different way, but also, anyhow, don't really know.
We will go through that together. That would be fine. We can help sort that one out.
Yeah.
Or
could I just send it off without being pre-populated?
Yes, send it to me if you filled
Yeah,
it in. Send it to me
okay.
at Church House.
Okay,
Perfect. Thank you, Helen.
okay.
And then I'm just going to quickly try to see if I can screen share. Hopefully this is going to work. It's tentative network. Okay, so you can probably see all my notes up on the left, can't you? So I'm going to take us to the headline Church of England page. So this is the Church of England Environment Programme, and both parts of the Church of England Environment website have just been significantly upgraded to create a database of resources. So here you can see under tackling our carbon emissions, particularly what I wanted to show you are the top two of the case studies and new videos and a route map to net zero carbon. Under the case studies, if you click on that, which I'm hoping it's going to let me play. There we go. You can search or just scroll through them, but here are a whole load of case studies from schools to churches to church centres. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to click on rural church moves away from oil to electric heating. And what you get in this then is a series of videos that have been professionally created, talking about the pressures, talking about the realities. There are then interviews with the companies who delivered the work, saying how they went about that. And then at the bottom, there's these areas called discussion questions, why we acted. They are theologically set and then established to try and use a small group work, or indeed as a PCC, as an introduction to the PCC meeting. And it's a really good set of resources with really well-made videos. So I kind of encourage you that they might be a great tool to look at. And we will make sure that this link is included within the newsletter that you get next week, so that you'll have that and you'll be able to see it from there. And the second link, I think, is actually my shortcut to the case studies. Let me just double check. It was a shortcut to the case studies. So on that one, it just takes you straight through to these, but using the head page to come straight in, I've just lost my way on this website, to come straight into the resources is a really good way of approaching it. But as I said, these links will be there, but you can probably see there's stuff about solar panels, there's stuff about vicarages, heat pumps, all sorts of different things going on from around the country. And in the next round, it would be wonderful to think that we as a diocese might be able to include some of our own stories into that setting. Fab. I think that is those bits done. Just bring up that. So I know there's been a huge amount of info that we've kind of gathered in and shared in and listened to this morning. So I just wanted to leave a minute or two just to say any further questions, reflections, encouragements you want to share, and then we will close in prayer. But anything else that anybody would like to sort of bring to the room this morning? Hi,
Can I just
Bridget.
ask quickly, the energy footprint tool that you mentioned, is that part of Eco Church or is that a C of E?
Thank you. So it's part of parish returns for the Church of England.
Oh, right, okay.
So if within parish returns each year, churches are required to submit numbers of people in the church, so on and so forth. And within that same web link, there is a place that you can put in your fuel usage, and it gives you your footprint and then helps us see the national picture. I will make sure we include that in the newsletter as a link. And if you're, just to say, if you're joining us for the first time, if you go to the diocesan website and click on, is it Creation Care Champions, Rosie, to sign up for that newsletter?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So click on I want to be a Creation Care Champion. And within there, then you can click up to the newsletter. And that means that after each of these meetings, we gather the slides, any information, and follow and share them the following week so that you have that all as resource available to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else that anyone would like to share this morning?
I
Hey.
just wanted to ask what, under community and global engagement, when we were having the presentation, what does XR mean? Host XR banners.
So do you want to go with that, George?
Yeah, can do. That's Extinction Rebellion, which is the campaigning and activist group.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I didn't know that was there.
Yeah, that's it.
It would be good if it began with an E, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess that's their rebellion.
There we are. That's it. It's the hip trendy thing. You can hashtag XR quickly, can't you? So you know. Wendy, hi.
Hi, I'd just like to know about the prayer you used at the beginning, and I'd like to know where I can find it, or if you've got the words for it. Or you could
So we will circulate it
It's
on
on the newsletter. It's
and we normally
every
have it on
time.
there.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank
Just
you.
because it seems to have been a helpful way for us to gather and focus on why we're here. So gladly share that with you. But it's actually from the Church of England Creation Tide Resources.
I thought it might be from somewhere like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go. I might have added one word to it, but don't tell a bishop or I'll get told off. But, there we go. Well, friends, thank you for your considerable amount of time and input this morning. George, thank you for sharing with us about the journey for St Mary's and recognising that was a team effort, working together, and a great partnership clearly between you and Sian the Vicar. I'm going to pray for us and then we will head off our separate ways. So let's pray. Creator God, we thank you for the goodness of the world in which we live, the world you made us, our home. Would you give us energy and tenacity to be guardians of this place, but open-handed guardians, willing to share, willing to give, willing to respond. Would you make us generous in the way that we respond to others who are seeking a restoration of this planet? And would you help us in all the things that lie ahead, practical things like PCC meetings or discussions with vicars or filling out online assessment tools, whatever they might be. Would you give us great wisdom and insight that we might together be in this business of cherishing creation, cutting carbon, and speaking up for your name and for your glory. Amen.
Amen.
Well, bless you, friends. Thank you for spending this time together. Sorry for the technical challenges, but we got there. And look forward to seeing you. Well, we have a break now for August. So we next meet, when September the what, Rosie?
8th, September the 8th. So it's not the first Thursday, because we thought that might be too much. It's not the first one, is it? It's the second one.
That's right.
Yes, yeah, the 1st of September is the first Thursday. It's the second Thursday, it's the 8th.
Fine. And we'll communicate that well in advance.
Yes.
So do make sure you're subscribed to the Creation Care Network stuff through the channel, and then you'll always get these the newsletters and information. Well, bless you all. Thank you for all that you're doing. Anything we can ever do to help, please just email. That's what we're here for.